Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is a review of Ultraman on Netflix. So this is a new 13-episode animated series that's out right now. It is a follow-up to the original Ultraman series, which I watched as a kid in reruns. And so that series was a live-action series, and the premise was there's a group called the Science Patrol that protects the Earth from monsters and space aliens. They'll investigate the menace, and then, if needed, they'll, launch missiles at it and stuff. And so one member of the Science Patrol named Hayata ends up merging with this alien called Ultraman. And Ultraman is like this 150-foot space cop who fights giant monsters. So whenever, they'd fight a giant monster, he'd hold up his beta capsule and become Ultraman and, then fight the monster and fly off at the end. And so that was the old series, and that was, again, live action. The new animated Netflix series follows Hayata's son. And so the idea is that at some point, Ultraman splits from Hayata and dies, but Hayata is left with altered DNA that gives him, strength and, he can jump really high, kind of generic superpowers. And he passes those on to his son. And so his son ends up becoming Ultraman by wearing this armor that enhances his power. And when he's wearing the armor, he also gets some of the energy powers that Ultraman has. And then there's a couple other characters that also wear Ultraman armor for some reason. And so all these characters are normal human size. No one grows. And that monsters they fight, for whatever reason, are all normal human size. There are no giant monsters, which is definitely a very big change for the series, because there's been, 30 seasons of Ultraman or whatever, and all of them are premised on, a giant Ultra fighting giant monsters. So this is a different take on Ultraman. It's based on a manga that came out some years ago, and so there's some good parts to it, and then there's a lot of stuff I didn't like. So let's start with the positive first. So first off, the action scenes are really good in this series. Now, it's derivative, it's generic, it's nothing you hadn't seen before if you've ever watched anime. But it's well done. It's well choreographed. They actually remember that the original Ultraman didn't use martial arts. He used grappling and wrestling moves. And it's just that they do a very good job of, making the fight scenes dramatic and satisfying and brutal. And, they'll pan away to someone looking at the fight from a distance, and you'll see a big explosion, and it just really captures the scope of, the power of the combatants. And so they're really, really well done. And there's also, some nice music thrown in there. They have a great Ultraman overture. They use very sparingly, as they do some of the signature moves of Ultraman. But when they put that in there with that soaring overture, it's super effective. So the action is actually really good. The alien design is actually really good too. It actually really harkens back to that series and really just fits in with the Ultraman series. And the Ultras, they're in armor, which is really kind of weird. It's very Iron Man-esque, armored right down to the same heads-up display you always see portrayed in Iron Man nowadays. But they are well designed for what they are. For an Iron Man version of Ultraman, they look good. And as far as the stuff I didn't like about the series, that's pretty much everything else. So just a minor point right off the bat, when you press play on an episode, there is no opening. I'm very used to this on both anime and Netflix series, where, I'll get the theme song and the credits and all this stuff to get me primed for whatever I'm about to watch. None of that in this series. It's just weird. The dubbing is atrocious. It does not seem to make any effort to try to match up the dialogue to the lips. If that sort of thing bothers you, don't bother watching this series. It will drive you insane. The animation is CG 2D animation. It's similar to, say, Iron Man Armored Adventures or something like that. There are some serious frame rate issues in the first episode that are like really bad and really distracting. Later episodes are much better and it flows pretty well and does okay for what it's trying to do. Honestly, I would have really preferred hand-drawn animation, but whatever. I think they probably chose this because the suits that they wear are very detailed. You know, they're very mechanical suits with a lot of stuff going on. So it's just a lot easier to animate that using a computer than it is to hand draw it. But I just wish there were some hand-drawn elements in there. I think it just would have helped. And the main problem to me, though, is just the writing. And I assume that these are probably problems that are inherited from the manga. Usually anime is a very faithful adaptation of the manga. I don't know. I think it was done with the best of intentions, but it is just super derivative, super generic, and I just couldn't really get a connection with any of the characters. I mean, they just, the bad guys are typically just there to be evil, and there's no particular interesting motivation or background or anything. The only time they throw in a twist is basically just, there'll be a character who's a red herring and they'll be fighting them and then they'll turn out not to have evil intentions. But usually it doesn't make any sense why they'd be fighting them in the first place anyway. Like, why didn't you just talk to them about it or something? Like, I don't know. And the heroes are very generic and flat. And they don't bother training Hayate's son at all. Somehow he can just magically fight these aliens without training, which is bizarre. It's still one of those things where mainly he wins just by believing in himself at the end of a battle. Because, that's exactly how it works in real life. If you get in a ring with Mike Tyson, just believe in yourself and you'll defeat him. That's how it works, kids. On the other hand, though, the flatness of the characters and the lack of training does avoid two tropes that could have bogged down the series. A lot of times in anime, training sequences can take up like 5 episodes or whatever, and then and then for villains, the exposition on their motivations can just be really melodramatic and really long to sit through. But don't worry, kids. If that's what you want from anime, there is an Ultraman that's in the last 4 episodes who will fill that void for you. And the dialogue I just found really awkward and at times just really melodramatic. And just, again, every anime cliche you could think of is in there. I mean, you could just take a checklist. There's the scene where the hero in the middle of a battle is doubting himself and the villain is just sitting there letting him mope in the middle of the battle for some reason. And, the female love interest, who he hasn't really met that much yet, is like yelling off the sidelines. I mean, she barely knows him or anything. It's like Ultraman, you're here to protect us and all this stuff. And he's like, is that why I'm here? To protect everybody? Yes! Yes! That's why you're here! Ultraman is so dense in this story. Oh my god, I cannot describe to you how stupid some of these characters are in this anime. He's so stupid that every time he's talking to this girl later in the series, they actually do get to know each other a little bit. And so every time he's talking to her, he lets slip he's Ultraman. Like in his dialogue, he'll just be like, yeah, I'm Ultraman. And this is exactly how he reacts. He covers, instead of trying to play it off, he yeah, that makes sense. That's so subtle. I mean, she doesn't notice anything. She doesn't think it's weird or anything. She doesn't notice that he said he's Ultraman or that he's acting really weird after saying that. It's unintentionally hilarious. And the Science Patrol. So in the old series, they were a very distinct group. They would wear these orange suits with helmets and they would go out and investigate scientific menaces, and they'd fight the monsters if needed. And they had this really cool ship that they'd fly around in, and they could shoot missiles and all that stuff at the monsters. And that was one of the signatures of the Ultra series, was that the heroes would have this like really cool ships they'd fly around in. None of that for this series. So in this series, the Science Patrol is very generic. It's guys in black suits, business suits, and those generic black security guards that are covered head to toe in like SWAT outfit stuff with machine guns. Yeah, that's the Science Patrol in this very generic derivative series. And so they are essentially men in black. They are there to cover up the existence of aliens. There aren't supposed to be aliens on Earth anymore or whatever at the beginning of the series, so they're trying to cover up their existence. And they're also killing any alien that steps out of line, and they do it with this really creepy, like bloodthirsty gusto. And there's this constant talk about how aliens are scum and how they're filthy and all this stuff, and just hating them on like this genetic level. And I think one of the things that's kind of disturbing about them just running around executing aliens is that instead of a more military type of group like the old Science Patrol, they very much resemble something like the FBI. So them just running around with the sole goal of killing the suspects is a little weird and disturbing. And while these geniuses don't train the new Ultraman, they do spend quite a bit of time yelling at him for having a conscience anytime he doesn't want to kill something in cold blood. They seem to yell at him for not being bloodthirsty enough. I don't know what they want from the kid. Do they need him to bathe in the blood of his enemies? It's just weird. So anyway, as you can tell, I really can't recommend this series. It's not terrible, but it's not good. It's kind of in between. And to me, it kind of teeters a little more towards that bad side. And especially when I consider how much better material there is out there that does the same thing, whether you're wanting to watch the Ultra series or whether you're wanting to watch, animes that are very similar, like Guyver or something like that. Go out and watch those instead would be my recommendation. If you do watch this, the one redeeming factor is the action. I mean, that is pretty much the only reason to watch this series. And honestly, if I could clip all the action scenes together and take out the dialogue, I would actually probably enjoy this. But unfortunately, you can't do that. And so I almost didn't watch this series at all. It just didn't really look like Ultraman at all to me. And I really instead wanted to watch the Ultra series on Netflix. I just wanted them to get some seasons of the real Ultraman show so I could watch him on Netflix. Just, sit down on my couch, press play, and just watch Ultraman. Because I haven't seen anything other than the original series. I've seen like episode here or there of a couple of other series just to know it exists. And like I just watched a trailer for like an Ultraman, I think it's Ultraman X or something movie. Oh my God, it looks amazing. Like, why can't we get that? Instead, we get this weird animated series I certainly didn't ask for myself. And it looks like it's going to be ongoing. It definitely has an open-ended ending, and the manga does go on for a little bit, so there's definitely more material to adapt. So I suspect we'll be getting future seasons of this series. But again, I would have much preferred getting the Ultraman series instead, the real Ultraman shows. Because honestly, at this point, I'm probably going to be dropping Netflix, maybe today, maybe next month, but I'm very close to that. There's just not a lot of stuff on there anymore that's interesting to me, and the price is going up, so I'm probably just going to drop it and then, subscribe for a month here and there when, they drop a series I'm interested in, like the rest of She-Ra this year, or the last season of Jessica Jones, whenever that comes out. But if they'd actually gotten Ultraman for real, maybe not the whole 30 seasons or whatever it's been, but just some of the seasons that are out there, I think that could have definitely motivated me to keep Netflix on a regular monthly basis. So I don't know why. I don't know what is keeping that from happening. I think there's a lot of potential with getting Toku shows like Ultraman and Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, all that stuff on Netflix, and I don't know what's keeping it from happening and what this emphasis is on like the new material that they're producing as a Netflix originals. I mean, there's just such a flood of Netflix originals that, you know, inevitably a lot of them just aren't going to be good, you know. And this Ultraman series is nowhere near as bad as some of the worst I've seen. It's nowhere near as bad as like Tarzan and Jane or Kong, King of the Apes, and it's nowhere near as boring as the Godzilla animated movies they've done. But it's still not something I wanted to watch. So as far as stuff I would recommend that I have actually enjoyed with Ultraman in it, there is the original series, which is out on DVD, but I will say that this is unfortunately a very flawed rendition of the original series. So what happened was they have the English audio, and then for the video, they have the Japanese video. And the problem with that is the Japanese show was a little longer each episode. They just have more minutes of showtime in Japan than they did in America. And so what they do is they don't cut the Japanese video to match the American audio, nor do they record any new lines to dub over those new Japanese scenes in the episode. So you will be watching an episode in English, and then suddenly they will start talking in Japanese, and it's just weird. I mean, it'll be like, there'll be a minute of Japanese dialogue in there, and then they'll go back to the English. I've never seen anything like it. It's appalling. It's unfortunate. I am glad that this exists, but my God, I hope at some point we get a real release that's respectful of the original series, because I understand that there are people out there who do not give a damn about the dubbed version of anything, and that is fine. But there are those of us who grew up and enjoyed it, and there are actors and writers that poured their heart and souls into producing that show, and it deserves to be preserved and deserves to be enjoyed by people like me and also future generations. As far as comic book goes, there were Ultraman comics that were produced in the 90s. And so you have these comics from Nemesis Comics, I believe is the company, and they have these beautiful painted covers. This was the original Ultraman miniseries back in the 90s. I highly recommend it. 3 issues, all painted covers, beautiful stuff. As far as other stuff in the comics goes, Dark Horse ended up getting Ultraman, and they reprinted a foreign series called Ultraman Tiga, which was based on, you know, the TV series. But this was actually a foreign comic that was put out of it, and they reprinted, you know, with obviously English text. And it is beautiful. Ultraman Tiga, the miniseries, is one of the most beautiful comic books I own. It is just a breathtaking artistic feat that I highly recommend. You know, you can get it in trade paperbacks, or you can try to hunt down the original issues, but either way, highly recommend Tiga, as well as the original Ultraman miniseries. As far as action figures go, I've got Figure Arts up here, and this is a really great figure that can do pretty much anything you want it to do. I mean, if you want him doing the finishing move, if you want him doing grappling moves and stuff like that, Figure Arts is where it's at, but there are plenty of cheaper alternatives. Ultraman's been around for decades, so there have been plenty of figures put out of him. Regardless, I highly recommend trying Ultraman out in some form. It's a really great series. It's a very long legacy. If you want to watch some of the series beyond the original, WatchToku.com looks like a good place to do it. They have quite a few different Ultraman series, not all of them, but definitely a significant amount. And you can start with a free trial, and I believe it's about $4 a month after that. So it's a pretty affordable way to do it. I'm definitely going to be doing that at some point myself. So that's it. Like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, yes, you moron, Ultraman is there to protect people. Bye. SWAT! Ha! SWAT!